Hey Ariel, thanks very much for joining us. If you could just start by introducing yourself, please.
Thank you, Alex. Pleasure to be with you today. So my name is Ariel Renous. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Augment.org. So Augment.org is an alternative MBA program taught by the best in business. So you can learn basically everything you would learn in a traditional MBA: finance, entrepreneurship, marketing, leadership, sales, management, etc. But you learn it from the best in business. And that means some of the world's greatest entrepreneurs, the founders of YouTube, Shazam, Wikipedia, and more, and some of the top executives, writers, authors on the planet. So it's a program that helps people get the fundamentals of business, but as well connect with other like-minded professionals and entrepreneurs from all across the globe. So we're trying to really replicate and democratize access to super high quality business education at a fraction of the cost.
And you've obviously gone on to start your own company. How was your education at school? Did you get a lot of business education or?
So my journey, I actually studied in the UK. You're based in the UK, right, Alex?
Yeah, London, yeah.
Yeah, so I studied in London. I did history, and my co-founder did math. So very, very different, but at the same university. So I have a non-business degree, but also a business degree, because after my undergrad, I moved to Paris and I did a master's in management, which is the equivalent to an MBA here in France, where I basically got in with like zero business skills and learned everything. The crazy thing, and this is what led us to build Augment, was that we didn't learn much. Or if I can say, most of what we learned it on the side, reading books because we're passionate about entrepreneurship, listening to podcasts, YouTube videos, etc. And this is where we saw the problem firsthand of how traditional business could prepare you to a career in finance and consulting, but not necessarily to the entrepreneurial journey.
And did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, always. Although, of course, when you're younger, it's not very clear what it entails, and you're not really also clear on like the different types of entrepreneurship. But I've always been seduced by the idea of just having an idea, pursuing it, rallying people around your idea, and just bringing it to life.
Did you start any businesses as a child or anything, any entrepreneurial experiences similar to that?
Yeah, so it was not really entrepreneurial, but we were like, uh, we were in like youth movements, doing a lot of sports, doing a lot of activities. Roy and myself back in Belgium 6, 7 years ago. And so I've always been like building projects with people. They were not for-profit projects. It was more a non-profit and like a youth association. But it was like all consuming, taking up most of our nights and weekends. And in a way, very similar to what you experience when you start a company.
And so I imagine one day you, later on, you've done your education and you're there thinking, wow, I've done an MBA, but it doesn't really prepare you to start a business, and there's not enough education out there for learning how to be an entrepreneur or connecting with entrepreneurs. How did you then go and act on this, and what was the catalyst for founding Augment?
Interesting question. So I was working at a company at the time. It's a unicorn startup based in Paris called Jellysmack. It was like during the middle of COVID, so everything was a bit weird, and I just like decided to quit to start my own company. I didn't know exactly what. I was pursuing different ideas, but I still decided to quit. And as soon as I quit, I decided, okay, I want to build Augment. I want to build this. And all the pieces started to fit together very, very quickly. Very quickly, we ended up raising a $2 million seed round because the idea was very appealing. It was very also similar to what I had done at Jellysmack. So a lot of synergies in that respect. But yeah, the first thing we did was to raise funding because we're extremely ambitious. We say, okay, we're going to build the next Harvard. Let's go. And this vision really resonated with a lot of investors.
And raising so early, how difficult was that?
Less difficult than the second round of funding. When you start, it's always easy because it's based on vision. It's based on storytelling. The second round was based on numbers, and it's a different game. But of course, it's always a lot of pressure. It's always very intense. A lot of things can go wrong. in the fundraising process. You get rejected a lot. You hear no a lot. So it's not easy, but the freedom it gives you and the level of ambition that you can have because you have this funding, because you have your instructors, your investors, to us, and this specific project was 100% worth it.
And you mentioned big ideas and thinking big. If I remember correctly, you said that big ideas is like the antidote to indifference. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
You've done your research. I like that. Yeah, an idea that comes up a lot is the one that basically the biggest threat to an early stage startup is not competition, it's indifference. Just people don't care. If you get people to care about your product, you get people to use your product, you get people to give you money at the end, and then you have a business. So how can you fight indifference? There are many different ways, but I've always found that having a big idea and a mission that resonates with many people from all around the globe is a very strong antidote to indifference.
And how do you go about thinking big? I think if you would have come to me, somebody would have come to me 10 years ago and said, think big, I just wouldn't have been able to. I'd be able to think big, but thinking and believing is different. So how do you be able to think big and then believe it?
I think that when you study the lives of great entrepreneurs, and this is also something that we do at Augment, and I read a lot of biographies of the great business people from the past, you realize they are no different. They just have a different sense of what's possible and a broader realm of opportunities. And basically, it just shifts your perspective and say, okay, but if they've done it, why can't I do it? This is something that comes up, I believe, a lot in my personal journey and professional journey as well, is basically what can you learn by studying people who've done it before you? And what patterns can you see? And if you see that basically everybody was as insecure, as inexperienced as you were, but had more self-belief or an inflated sense of what was possible, and that this is exactly what carried their career and trajectory, then you try to mimic and you see that it works.
And you mentioned reading biographies, and yeah, I can resonate to that. I'd be curious if there's anyone, particularly any biography you read that really stood out to you.
I read so many. One of the most recent ones was the one by Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. It's called Made in America. I particularly like this one because he's not a tech guy and I'm not a tech guy. So of course you read a lot of biographies of tech people, geeks, and I'm not one. And what I loved about this one in particular is that when you start the biography, Sam, so the author and founder of Walmart, almost seems like a normal guy. And the more you get to know him, the more you see like the specificities and the immense intensity he brings to everything he makes and the intense levels of ambition. And you only see it over time, across decades. And I believe this was fascinating.
And you've had this big idea, you've seen this big problem that business education is not accessible and it's not doing the right things. But obviously going into the field of education, it can be quite difficult to make money as opposed to, say, fintech and other industries. What made you convinced that edtech and education was the right industry?
Is it the right industry? I don't know.
True.
No, but exactly as you said, it's a very difficult industry. Is it the best one to make money in? Probably not. It's a really good one if you want to impact lives positively. To me, it was more out of passion and purpose than trying to spot the best business opportunity out there. And I believe this is the case for most of the people who work in education or education technologies.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And how did you go about getting your first customers and then finding product market fit?
Long journey, a lot of trials and errors. Basically, something that's so fascinating these days is that thanks to social media platforms, you can advertise your product basically anywhere. As you can hear, I'm based here in Paris. The company is a French company, but we generate more than 50% of the revenue in the US and less than 2% in France. We're just like running ads, testing different messaging, seeing what works, and then spending a lot of time on the phone. Just right after this, I have a phone call with a customer just to understand how they think, what words do they use, all this.
Could you give me an example of how the customers may think?
No, but it's fascinating because I will tell you like one very crazy example from last week. So basically, when they start the program, we always ask them, what skills do you hope to gain from this course? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? We have like more than 500 people who completed the survey. And one of the top expression that was used was skills development, gaining business skills. And this is something we never used in our landing pages, ads, basically any marketing communication. When we're just like skimming through the answers, it was obvious. Skills, building business skills. But this was just like, we would tell it in a different way. Of course, we would convey the exact same idea, but we're not using the same words. So we would connect less and we would miss the target sometimes, I'm sure. And so, okay, you see that in the data and you see that when you talk to customers, then of course you adapt your marketing and communication.
Teaching skills is quite difficult, right? Because education fundamentally is often very theoretical.
Yeah. True.
How do you go about being able to provide and teach good skills?
So basically, the entire teaching philosophy at Augment is story-based. I believe we learn better with stories, and this is why we teach business based on the stories from products and services we used in our everyday life. Shazam, YouTube, Wikipedia, Lime, Eventbrite. We use these products and tools every day. And so basically, I really believe that the way you teach with the highest impact is you make people resonate with the concept and you illustrate the concept with a story that they will remember the next time they use the app.
Often with education, major problem is, I suppose this is like most products really, but branding. So people will not always care so much about the content as they will the brand of the university. How do you manage to navigate this issue?
Yeah, branding is so important, but there are many ways to build a brand. There is this framework that I like, the 3Bs framework. You can, to build a personal brand, you can brag, you can borrow, or you can just brand it in a nice way. And basically, we do a bit of all this. We borrow the credibility of our instructors. We brand it in a super nice way. And if you go on the website, you see that the production quality is on par with basically what you can see on Netflix or on other platforms like masterclass.com. And we brag because basically we share the success stories from our students and basically what everybody does. So yes, building a brand is crucial and central to launching any type of education product, but you don't need to be Harvard to do it. You can do it at basically any scale.
See, you've taken your own program. I'd be curious what you learned from doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of meta because our business is to teach people business. And so in the process, I got to sit down and build and co-create courses with some of the greatest business minds of our generation. So it was insanely valuable. Learning so many things. Maybe one of the key lessons is that there are so many different ways of being successful. And all these instructors have such different personalities and reached success through different paths that I no longer believe that there's only one type of people who succeed and there is only one way to be and one mindset. They're all so different in their strengths that I'm more and more bullish on the fact that like anyone can be successful.
And I'd be interested to hear more about how these business people differ, because when I speak to business people and entrepreneurs and founders, I wouldn't say they're all the same, but I'd say they share a lot in common. One would be like the ability to think big. Another would be a sports background, so they've got that desire to compete. I'd be curious how you see this.
Yeah, I will give very concrete examples. Steve Chen, the founder of YouTube. He was the original CTO of YouTube and sold YouTube for $1.7 billion to Google in 2006. Crazy successful, very quiet guy. Very smart, but very geeky, very quiet. Then you've got like the Chris Barton, the founder of Shazam, totally like visionary leader, non-tech background, but this capacity to sell you anything, to convince you, to bring you into his worldview and vision and story. And then you've got Anne Hyatt. She was the first ever Google chief of staff, and she was the right hand at Amazon for Jeff Bezos for the first 4 years of Amazon. Super organized, super intense. You really like you can trust her. You would delegate everything to her and you trust this person. And these are like three extreme personalities. So maybe what they have in common is that they have some sort of like extreme strength, but they're so different. And there is actually so little overlap in the actual skills and the way they think. I believe is fascinating.
And what would you say your strengths and weaknesses as a founder are?
My strengths and weaknesses. This is interesting. I've never had this question before. Strength, I would say, like I'm very positive and enthusiastic, and I believe like everything can be done. And this, I think, is one of the necessary forces to a successful company and successful startup. This can-do attitude and mindset. Weaknesses, the obvious one is lack of experience, of course, but
It can also be a strength though, right?
yes. I also see like so many mistakes that I do. But if I look more at like my personality, because this is more weakness that is like based on a certain context, I get really bored with like details. I'm like a big picture guy, which is good if you can surround yourself with people who are good with details. Because at the end of the day, good operations and great executions is all about the details. The last 20% that take up 80% of the workload, the brain power. And to be honest, I'm not very good at that. Fortunately, I have people in the team who are really good at that.
That's interesting because I also find that as well. Like for me myself, I'm like a typical ADHD guy. I love the big picture, but find the details really can be quite stressful or difficult.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, but I was like also trying to analyze myself and my weaknesses. The fact that like I'm sometimes too positive and I get too excited about like, okay, what's next? But sometimes you need to just slow down, focus on basically improving what you have. And it's always finding this balance that you need people that do the counterbalance.
I think that's something that's really important as a founder is always thinking of the next thing, because that's how you grow and create great things. No discovery was made by just focusing on what we've got, so it's cool. But at the same time, like you say, you need to be able to be really focused on the task at hand and the detail and being as efficient as possible. So how did you get people around you that had complementary skill sets to yourself?
You just hire great people, which is easier said than done. But you can basically, and I believe like this is one of the greatest perks as an entrepreneur. You get to pick who you work with, and you get to pick your colleagues, and basically to build a team and a culture. And of course, you will look at people who have complementary skills and who can bring something that you don't have as a founder. And I'm very proud and happy to say that now in the team we have people that are much better than I am at most of the things in this business. And I take a lot of pride in that.
What's the most challenging thing you find about being a founder?
The ups and the downs. So basically, you're extremely emotionally invested. And so when things go well, that's a blessing. When things go sideways, then you start questioning everything, and you're extremely involved emotionally. So basically, super sensible to everything that's working or not working, and things will go wrong at a lot of times in the startup journey, and you need to be ready and prepared for that.
And how do you deal with the ups and downs?
Honestly, just experience. There is this. I love this quote from Brand Chesky from Airbnb. Things are never as bad as they seem and never as good as they seem. Just like taking a bit of perspective. Yeah, it's a roller coaster, but at some point, if you've been on a roller coaster for 2.5 years, which is my case now, you know that you're a bit more numb, and it's a good thing.
I've already got a flavour of like your ambitions for the business, but what are your? I'd be interested in hearing about your goals, near term and long term.
Yeah, long term is, I will ask you a question. Where do you go to learn about business?
YouTube, podcast,
Exactly.
and ringing people or emailing people who've done it.
Yeah, yeah. But where do you take great online business courses? We want to be this destination platform. So building a premier online business education brand. So this is the goal. This is the vision. I want that Augment becomes synonymous to great bit online business courses. In the same way that Code Academy is like where you go and learn code, Skillshare is where you go and learn creative skills, Augment is where you go and learn business skills. So this is the long-term vision. Short-term vision, we're always producing new content, launching new course. Next one, obviously, is AI. We've signed a really great instructor to be leading our AI course and AI program. So very excited about that. But yeah, I believe we have product market fit. So we just need to be doing more of what we are doing today.
Do most of your customers come from content?
Yeah, content, a lot of organic, a lot of referrals as well, a lot of coming from events and the community side, because we host events every month in either London, New York, or for instance, or this month we go to Web Summit Qatar to do it in Doha, because we have a very strong community in the Middle East. So yeah, these are the main levers of growth.
What are your opinions on current education? So I know you've said that there's not a lot out there for being an entrepreneur, but what do you think generally the state of education?
Traditional education system is too rigid, too outdated. We all know that. We all feel that things are changing, but the thing is that work is changing faster than education models. And this is why most people learn on YouTube, and this is why there is such big opportunities to build new education products in all these new areas and all these new verticals, which is, I believe, extremely exciting. Does that mean that the big incumbents will go away anytime soon? Probably not. But I believe there is like massive room for new players to come in and to just promote new teaching philosophies, new education products that will be more modern, more relevant, more actionable, more up to date, just more everything.
And say hypothetically, you were tasked tomorrow, you were thrown on this earth out of nowhere, you were tasked tomorrow with starting a business, maybe an education, like what would you do if it wasn't Augment?
If I had to build a business in education right now, simple, teach people AI. It's so straightforward. There are so many ways, so many angles to address this market. And basically I would do the same that we do at Augment. I will not focus on like trying to find a new learning method or building tools. I would focus on creating amazing education content. This is no shortcuts on that. This is what's difficult. And content is the atomic unit of learning. A lot of people focus on building LMS and teaching tools and stuff like this. But I believe like the real value is creating amazing differentiated content.
And often I think that, you can create the great content, but then I think sometimes with industries like AI is the education of why people need to learn it. Like maybe there's a lot of people out there who don't know how important it is to learn AI or even any skill.
Yeah, honestly, I believe AI people feel that things are changing so fast. They see it, they hear it at work, they see how their boss and management is talking about AI. I believe like people realize how important the changes are going to be.
And I believe you are into your chess. How do you find chess translates or shares in common with business?
Yeah, you've really done your research. I'm super into chess. I play chess every day on the computer with strangers online. I just love it. Just for like 10, 20 minutes, you focus on something totally different. So many different lessons from chess. But basically, if we like make abstraction of chess, it's just like having a thing on the side where I try to get better at every day. I read about chess. I watch videos about chess. I take courses, online chess courses. And it's just like, how, as an adult and working professional, do you maintain the spirit of, okay, there is this thing that I'm pursuing and I want to be better at, and I'm trying to improve myself, and I'm spending time and investing resources and brain cells to get better at something. I just love it.
Yeah, I totally get that. I do something similar with, I've never played chess in my life, but with poker, and it's
Oh,
also
nice.
quite similar. But it also makes me interested in the question about complete versus incomplete information. And I've seen a lot of people say that, chess is great, but it's not completely analogous to business in real life because the information's complete, whereas other games like poker are incomplete information and they're more analogous to business in real life. I'd be curious if you had a thought on that.
Yeah, it's funny. My co-founder is a poker player and I'm a chess player. I find that so many entrepreneurs are either one of them, one of the two. I don't really play poker. So I've played a few times, and I know the rules, but I cannot really compare it to chess. I believe that in chess, the fact, like, you don't have complete information, even though you could have if you were supercomputer. You still don't have complete information. Basically, in the same way that in business, if you knew everything and if you were like 100% clever and reasonable, and you had no emotions, you had perfect memory, you could probably solve any business problem. In the same way that a computer can solve most chess positions. But we are humans, and we fail and we make mistakes and we have limitations, and that translates into errors in checks and in chess.
Nice. And that makes me think about business and thinking, like, when you see people who are great entrepreneurs, great founders, they're incredibly able and have a great ability to strategize, think differently, and employ different mental models and see things in different ways. And I think for me in my life, one turning point was when I realized how beneficial it was to read into physics and maths and all other areas and learn from them and apply them to business. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on this line of thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. I believe you can really change your life with content. When I try to look back at my life and basically what has been the past 10 years, the inflection point is when I started listening to podcasts. I was just a random kid in Belgium during COVID, back at my parents' place. And all of a sudden, boom, I had access to all the most brilliant minds in Silicon Valley. And this totally opened up my perspectives on what was possible in the world, different levels of ambition, crazy new ideas. And it shaped my personality, who I am, and basically I've seen firsthand how you can actually plug your brain into a different power source and basically feed it with like a different type of food that makes you just be incredibly different to everybody around you. And to me, it was business podcast at the time because I was a history kid who knew nothing about business. I'm sure that it can 100% work with physics and math, but I really believe in the power of that. Yeah.
Do you think learning a lot about history has benefited you?
No.
Really?
Yeah. Not really. I should have studied engineering or something a bit more serious. History is a fun hobby. You just do it on the side, but this is not the best decisions I've made.
And last question, do you have a guiding principle or a best piece of advice you've been given or anything similar to this?
To a business advice, life advice.
Anything.
Interesting. Did you ever share yours on your podcast?
No, but I can.
Let's go.
I think for me it would be not necessarily an advice, but one book, and it was the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And reading that just completely, it just dumbed everything down to me. And it was that business isn't a skill; it's multiple skills together. And don't try and learn business; try and learn all different types of skills. And then it also said about learning to build and learning to sell. Like, if you can build, you're great. If you can sell, you're great. But if you do both, you're perfect. Or not necessarily perfect, but as close to as possible. And I think reading that just made me just change the way I thought, and I was just So I'd say that book, I've read it like 4 times. It was like my
Amazing.
sort of guiding principle towards everything now, like my Bible.
Amazing. And what can I say? Something that I believe like really works and is both very unnatural but easy to do is to turn up your level of ambition. And basically, it's just a simple trick that will open so many doors, make you consider crazy projects and eventually realize some. And something that I heard once in, I don't know, some obscure business podcast and that struck me at the time, and I still try to remember that every day, is that building a very ambitious business is not necessarily harder than just building any business. And that probably running the restaurant down the road is as draining as whatever Sam Altman running OpenAI. Everybody has 24 hours in the day, need to sleep 6 to 8 hours, and basically pick a very ambitious project, and that might be easier to execute and to put it off than just like settling for something that's slightly lower on the ambition bar.
Yeah, that's really insightful, because I think there's also, I remember reading someone on that, I think it was a book called 10x is easier than 2x. And when I saw that, I was like, true, yes. So running a restaurant is really hard. Running a multinational business is really hard. Pick which one, they're both going to be really hard, right?
100%. 100%.
But Ariel, thank you so much for joining us. It's amazing what you're doing. Great. Amazing what you're doing at Augment, and really, really inspiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.